Welcome back to the Student Hub Live. Well, we've been having a great morning so far, and I think we're all getting to the stage now of talking about what modules we're studying, why we're studying, how many kids and animals we've got to juggle with, and various other things. But in this session, we're going to ask 3 students about what they wish someone had told them. So we've got lots and lots of new people in the chat, but some experienced students as well. So I'm delighted to welcome Liliana and Adrian and Simon. Now, Simon, I'm going to start with you because you came to our Freshers event before, and now you're here in person.
Yes, this was how I started at the Open University, and I thought to myself as I watched HJ on the chat with, I want to say Sophie, but anyway, I thought to myself, one day that could be me, and it is.
Here it is.
It is. So I'm very excited actually to be here.
Brilliant, excellent. Adrian, what are you studying?
Biology.
Okay, and where are you at in your studies now?
I've just finished.
Yeah.
So just waiting for the final, fingers crossed,
And you're
kind
alive.
of thing. Yeah.
And well, showing us it can be done. Liliana, what are you studying?
I'm studying applied linguistics, a master's in applied linguistics.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh, super exciting. And what are you studying?
I am still officially a student doing computing and IT, but I'm waiting for an EMA, and then it will all be over.
And then what are you going to do?
A master's degree. I promised my wife no more studying. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a tricky one as well. I'm still studying, so it doesn't ever end, I don't think, once you get the hang of it. Okay, so we asked you guys, you've all had doing really different things, and you've all had really, really different experiences. But the key question that I put to you is, what do you wish someone had told you when you first started studying? What are you going to tell everyone at home?
Stressing achieves nothing. I think that's my big thing. I generally, I think I've wasted probably about 50% of the time I should be studying stressing about study, and it's never achieved anything. I don't ever look back and go, that's brilliant, that stressing absolutely helped.
Yeah.
So
what sort of things would you stress about?
Well, I think all the things, have I done enough work? Have I put enough time aside for this? Is this TMA going horribly wrong? Do I understand this? Can I do this work today? I mean, just generally, just that internal dialogue, the blank page thing, where you get the blank page. Every TMA, you always start them, and I always wish I could kind of just have a glimpse into the future and see the final TMA, just to see. Oh, there are 6 pages there, but actually, I think I've probably takes me a good hour and a half to just stop stressing and look at a blank page. So that is the thing I would like to say, actually enjoy studying, because if I had enjoyed it and said, oh, this doesn't matter, I think I would have actually done better. So yeah, don't stress.
It is hard though, I think, and lots of people are chatting at home. Actually, I must tell you one thing. If there's chat, and you can by all means listen and watch what we're saying, but there's very rarely an opportunity you get together and talk to everyone online, so do make the most of that. But equally, if it's overwhelming, you can just change the interface that you've got so that the chat is either bigger or smaller, and do what you want to. But there's a pin button. So if someone said something that you'd like to go back to, on the top right-hand side of that chat page, you can just click on that, and then it'll stop everything, and you can scroll up and down from that as well. So, Adrian, then, how do you feel at the end of your studies then, also thinking about what Simon's saying about not stressing and stuff? Does any of that, I mean, you were a lot more calm, I guess, in your studies. You're probably the calmest, most ordered out of all of us.
I follow the planner.
Yeah.
I think that's a key for me. When you come to the end, when you do your final research module, there is no planner. So that kind of hits you like a ton of bricks, because you don't realise how much you rely on having the plan there, something to follow all the time. You have to make your own. That's quite difficult, but you get through it. So
how did you deal with managing your time then and that planner? Because I mean, we've been hearing from Jerry and Jessica about how you get your week 1 activities and early doors. It's really nicely structured. You've got 45 minutes on this, an hour on that, etc. How did you find going through that, and what did that teach you then when you had to make your own planner?
That's a difficult one to answer. I don't know. To be perfectly honest with you, when you're having to do it yourself, you don't really think about the plans that you've done before. You kind of just look at the work that you've got to do. So I suppose there is a little bit of crossover where you think, well, when I've had to do this in the past, how would I have done that? So you relate back to things like that. But yeah, mostly you just wing it, I think, a lot of the time. But you do, I think most people do.
Yeah.
I think that, again, I tended when I started this to say I will do a study day and I'll do 2 evenings, and so I put aside 10 hours if I was doing a module. But whereas what I would now say is Sunday evening or whenever you've got like 5 minutes, actually just flick ahead, see what you've set for this week, and actually look, well, actually, do I need, because some weeks are lighter than others, and you can actually plan things and say, oh, I don't need a whole study week this week. I could probably do that in 3 evenings. So flick ahead, find out what you're going to be studying this week, right at the minute, and spend 5 minutes just planning study on a Saturday night or whatever, and then go to the pub.
Oh, it's important.
Me, Karen, that you were surprised that you don't have to actually read everything.
Yeah.
And when I heard you say that, I thought, well, I wish somebody had told me that, because I've literally read everything that's been put in front of me, you know.
Yeah.
But you don't have to read absolutely everything.
And it goes back, I guess, to why people are studying, because if you want to study for a career reason, you're never going to remember about week 2 and block 2, this, that and the other, and so-and-so's theory. It's important to know if someone says to you, oh, what about that? You can go back and find it. But it's about the skills and the knowledge, and sometimes you can miss things out or take a scan over it. You don't need to read it in that much detail. But yeah, it's important to know that you don't have to do everything. It's all about the assessment.
The further you get through your studies, you kind of realise that, I've already got that.
Yeah.
I don't need to read this again.
Yeah. And this thing about winging it, I think, is great, because everyone studies really differently. I mean, I need a deadline. I need quite a lot of pressure to actually do things. I'm not very well disciplined in certain ways. Like I look at some OU students, many of whom will be here today saying, I've got my calendar and my stationery and this, that and the other. Whereas for me, life often is quite haphazard. So everyone studies in different ways, and that winging it, I think, is a great way of putting it, because very often I hear so many students say, everyone else is on track, everyone else is on time, everyone's done everything, and I'm sitting here by the side of a pool with a book that's wet and I'm trying to highlight things and I don't even know what I'm reading. And sometimes you can feel like you are just winging it a bit too much. I mean, Anna loves your point about the stressing, Simon, but Nat says she's stressed about not being stressed. So there's this thing going on here.
Yeah, it's different people. Different people deal with things in different ways.
I used to try and, again, actually do a week's study in a week. So it didn't always work, and there were times when I was hopelessly behind, and there were times when I actually got a little bit ahead, not so many of those. But I actually found that if you do a week study in a week, because you will find sometimes people in tutorials saying, oh, I finished block 2 weeks ago. But I think, plod. I think that, for me, plodding worked, because then I knew, it made it contained. And it meant that actually, because I think it's a bit of a mountain to climb, and when you're starting Freshers Week, the idea of having a degree in 6 years' time is probably a bit of a... So to actually break it down and say, actually, this week, this is what's going to happen. I found that worked for me, plodding and ignoring the people who were miles ahead. Some people do find that helpful, because then they can sort of, they start their course as soon as they get the materials.
But it's your own race, isn't it? And everyone's different. Liliana, you're at a sort of slightly different stage, because you're doing a master's and you're doing applied linguistics, which is very specific. And I just wanted to ask you about this idea about being passionate about your particular area. You are very passionate about what you're studying, and you also read quite widely around that, and you use your social space to support things with Twitter and various ways of knowing about your subject area. But for some students, maybe who are doing Access or Level 1, they might get some economics or something that they don't feel particularly happy about studying. So what's your advice then about being passionate about what you're doing and keeping that motivation, whilst also knowing there's some other stuff you might not be so keen on?
Yeah, well, for me, it works planning. I like planning, even my holidays, I like to plan. So when I had a gap of about 9 years of not studying after my bachelor's, and I thought, well, if I'm still reading, I'm still interested in that specific subject, I thought, well, why not have a go? So before I enrolled on the course, obviously, I was reading about it. I use Twitter, I use OpenLearn, and also Future Learn. So I registered on a course about applied linguistics. It was only 3-4 months course, just to give me that flavor of what I was going to to start in October, and that worked for me. I mean, it was just about reading about it. The more information. So I was sure that was what I wanted to do. Yeah.
How have you guys found that within your study journey? I mean, obviously completing level 3, you're getting more and more specialised. Do you remember how you found it at level 1 where there was a range of stuff? Was there anything actually as well that you thought, I really don't want to do that, but then you did enjoy doing when you got into it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think with the sciences, you have to do everything to start with, and as you go through, it narrows down. And I remember other students saying, I don't know why I have to do this. Yeah. Why do I have to do biology? I'm doing a degree in astronomy or whatever. But you think you have to cover all the bases so that you can then narrow it down. You have to have a broad sort of knowledge base in the first place.
And how did you deal with that, the areas that you didn't like doing? Did you just get them out of the way? Did you ignore them? You didn't skip anything. You should have talked to me first.
No, I didn't skip anything. There are definitely... I spoke to somebody at the OU actually in student support, and they told me that nobody that does a degree enjoys everything about that degree. And as soon as she said that, you think, yeah, I'm normal then. This is what everybody else does. Yeah. So
I found maths, I mean, just as a subject, and it's one of those things that I decided to do the computing course. And I completely failed maths at school, totally. So actually, the maths was the thing that I really hated, and I had to do a whole module in it. But I really enjoyed it. And the thing I loved, and I can't sort of praise the OU enough for this, is that the start of it was so, not easy, but really easy to get into. And I was like, this isn't a degree. I'm doing like, this is too easy. Yeah. But it was amazing, because then I reached the end of that module. This is the MU123, and I was amazed at how much maths I knew.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So it was the thought of it, not the actual math.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think whenever you start, for me, I had a very difficult educational background, and I think whenever you start education, you always have those hooks in. So, it's a shame, but, the moment I opened a maths book until I did MU123, I could hear, teachers telling me that I can't do maths and that I'm, and those are the things, actually. So, yeah, that unit just on its own was horrendous to look at as a box. Yeah. But actually, no, I mean, it was great.
And people say very similar things about referencing. I don't understand referencing. I'm really, really scared of it. And I mean, you guys must have been doing lots of referencing, I hope.
Yeah, I think referencing is another one. You kind of go through most of your study, again, sort of winging it with referencing, because you can get away with it. When you get to the end, you can't get away with it. It's not actually as difficult as you think it is. It's just one of those things that you think, oh, I'll do it in the next module. I'll think about it then. And then when you have to think about it, you look at it and you think, actually, this is not as bad. Yeah. There's lots of referencing tools out there you can use as well. So,
if you told me when I had just got my first box from the OU that one day I would have a 62 references at the end of an assignment, but amazingly there are, and more amazingly, I've actually read most of them.
So, all of them. all of them. Yeah,
absolutely. So it's again, that is something. Yeah, referencing, and actually just you begin by thinking I could never tackle something like that, but you can. Yeah. And referencing is. Yeah, after a while it becomes almost second nature, actually, and you just you find yourself clicking away, open brackets, put reference in.
Yeah.
So yeah. I now I could probably mutter Harvard references in my sleep.
If you wanted to. Right.
Yes.
HJ and Scott, how's everyone at home?
Yeah, really good. They're mostly stressed about time, having enough time for things. They just how are we going to fit it all in? How do you, Kiara had a really good question about, how do I avoid burnout and manage my study and still stay healthy and those kinds of questions. And that just seems to be a theme now going through this.
I think a great thing about the chat, though, Tala said earlier that I'm so nervous about falling behind. And then Chloe and a lot of other people have said that's my biggest fear as well. We all feel the same thing. I remember when I started, I felt like I was perpetually behind. I didn't know where I was or what I needed to do. But I think the thing we're picking up from the chat is everyone's in the same situation. We're all just learning how to get started and how to get going with our studies. And it's great hearing from fellow OU students in the studio as well to see how they've managed it and that they've actually got through as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've got a time management workshop in Adobe Connect. So if you go onto the Student Hub Live website, you can book onto that time management workshop. It's a structured hour-long thing with lots of tools and things that we'll give you. So you can think then about how you're managing your time. I think one of the challenges with time is that when you're told there is 8 hours or 10 hours, whilst there's some variability within that time, if you don't have 8 hours a week, and that isn't always from 4 a.m. till whatever time on a Sunday morning, which is just completely unachievable. You need to sort of carve out that time. How did you guys go about carving that time out in your studies? Any creative ways of getting time and maybe prioritising certain activities? Liliana?
Prioritising. Well, I like reading, so I find that reading I like it, but it also takes me a little bit more because English is not my first language.
Yeah.
So although I don't translate it in my head, that would be impossible, but it takes me longer. So I just prioritize reading first before going through any activities. I work long hours, but I always plan for the weekend. So the weekend will be more study than any time.
Yeah. And what about the comments about burnout and this balance? I mean, we've got some programmes later today about work-life balance and staying well, because it is really important. It is an endurance event, not a sprint.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky because I was able to do a little bit of flexible working, and I found if I could have a morning to study, that worked really well. But it is true that things have got to go, and sadly some of my hobbies have just gone the way of the wind. I'm hoping that they're going to come back now, and I do feel, particularly to start off with, you're very enthusiastic, to finish you can see the finish line. It is sort of, I found level 2 challenging, level 2 particularly, because it's that sort of middle point where you're not setting off, but you're still some distance, a couple of years away from, the final sprint, as it were. So that is difficult. And yeah, I do think you can't take 6 years off your life. So you've got to have that balance, because it is a long time. So, some things do go, but you've still got to keep time for family, friends, things that are really important, or else you will just go mad, I think.
Yeah.
I think the plan is useful.
Yeah.
Again, and I think similar to Liliana, that you like to plan things. I think you have to plan things. There's a certain degree of winging it where you may leave things from one week to the next, but you plan to do that. You don't just think, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So you still have a plan all the way through.
Yeah.
I think you have to do that, and I was quite lucky with work as well. It's quite flexible.
Yeah.
I think also it's good celebration. Once you have achieved, for example, your first TMA, go and celebrate with family, with friends, give you some stimulation to keep going, or have regular breaks as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's about prioritising, because if life does get in the way, which it often does, OU tutors really understand, that sometimes it can just need a bit of refocusing, doesn't it?
Yeah, don't punish yourself. Don't study when you can't study.
Yeah.
Don't study when you're not in the mood to do it, because it's pointless.
Yeah.
You just do it when you're in the right mood to do it, and you'll find it just flows.
Yeah.
I had a TMA due the week I moved house, and my tutor was brilliant. He said, "Oh, I'll give you an extension," and I was like, "No, I will do this." And he was like, "Right, okay, here's my number. Phone me and you get the extension." And I was like, still on target right till move day.
Yeah.
And then I rang him and said, "The TMA's in tomorrow." And he was like, 5 days. So, you know, again, those sorts of things. I mean, I've had some really good tutors, and I think if there's a good excuse, they're always amenable, and there's always a bit of flexibility. But I do think it's worth contacting your tutor early in advance. So I spoke to my tutor in that instance a couple of weeks before, and I was still planning, idiotically, I think, to submit on time.
It's good to try and, I mean, we've heard so much about trying to stay on track, and I think it is really important because from my experience with students, they get extensions and extensions and they bank up, and then I see the marks becoming more important towards the end of a module. Often they're weighted more heavily, and you think, oh, it becomes this circle. If you don't try and claw back some of that time and refocus, you can end up in a bit of a pickle. So I think you were really wise to try, but equally that's a big thing that's going on. So sometimes extensions can really be helpful, and that flexibility is amazing, but sometimes it cannot be helpful because then you can feel like you're always behind, and that feeling can be just overwhelming.
And I haven't asked for many extensions. I think I can count on one hand all the extensions I've done over all 3 levels.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you. Now, I see you've brought a teapot here, and we have a hierarchy of needs, which we're going to kick off in a bit. So this is our hierarchy of needs, which some students may be familiar with, but ultimately it's a shelf. And so what we're going to ask people to do, and you can make suggestions at home as well, and you can send us photographs and we'll put them on our shelf if you've got something you think. The hierarchy of needs is what do you think OU students most need to support them in their studies? So what have you bought, Simon?
Well, I bought the teapot.
Right.
I think.
Has it got a genie in it?
No, well,
We rub it.
everybody said this. Can I have a distinction for my AMA? No. And it is. Actually, this is more of a crutch than anything else because, again, I find I've even got a mug at home that says "but first tea," and I find that is absolute. I just put everything on the table, ready to study. Tea. Yeah. And that's it. So yes, and it's a teapot because, then you're not going to be getting up, and so you just sort of keep going for the next hour. Tea. Every time I finish something off, finish a page, finish a section, cup of tea, So yeah, that is. I do think that is more than just a teapot. I do think that is my crutch / first aid / supportive person to mop my brow.
And when you're not studying, what's going to happen to the teapot?
I've got some things I want to do actually. I've got some things. I think I might write something. I don't know what, but I might write something because I'm now used to sitting there and bashing away and helping tea. So I think that's what's going to happen to it. Either that or put it on the wall as a trophy.
Yes, exactly. Well, it looks quite practical as well. Thank you guys all so much. That's been a really, really useful session. And if you guys want to put something on, we can put it on later and we'll start building that tree up because, you'll be back a little bit later, won't you, Adrian, as well. So, and thank you very much, Liliana and Simon. We'll see you later again. Thank you very much for that session. I hope you found it useful. I'm not sure whether you're still drinking the tea, coffee. I've heard there's even iron brew going on. In our next session, we're going to take a specific look at supporting you in your studies. So I've invited some colleagues from our student support team. If you haven't been in touch with them, they're just fab. So they're going to tell you about all the ways that the Open University can offer support to you. We're now going to show you some more videos around our campus. We're going to look at the Abrahamian statue and also the cellar bar. Not, of course, that we advocate drinking alcohol, but an interesting place nonetheless. See you in a few minutes for our next live session.